Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first and last word poetry series. And I'm very excited to see everyone here tonight. And we have two wonderful readers. So let's get started. Our first reader is Julia Lisella. Her latest collection of poems, Our Lively Kingdom, Bordighera Press, was named a finalist in 2023 Patterson Book Prize and Grand Prize finalist, and Poetry Honorable Mention for the Eric Hoffer Book Award. Her other collections include Always, Terrain, and the chapbook Love Song Hiroshima. Her poems have appeared in Plowshares, Alaska Quarterly, The Common, Nimrod, Pangerus, and many others. And you can read more about her on her website, julialicellapoetry.com. And I give you Julia.
Hi, Gloria, and hi, everyone. Thank you, Gloria, so much. And to Harris, too, for this opportunity to read in this series. Pretty long-running series, right, Gloria? How long?
15 years.
Nice. Yeah, so I'm going to read a few poems from Our Lively Kingdom, and then some poems that I've been working on since this book came out in 2023, fall of 22, I forget. And a lot of the poems in this book were written around the last Trump administration. And when I went back to look at the book, I mean, so many of these issues just resonating again. How could they not, I guess? So I'm going to read a few from here that I think still, um, still matter at this time, such a difficult time. So this one is appropriately named Anger. It has two epigraphs. Um, One is from the Reverend Dr. Maggie Arnold. Anger is as sure a signal of love as smoke is of fire. And the other epigraph is from Psalm 37. Cease from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself in any way to do evil. Anger. When I bend down to hear the rosemary grow, half shadowed from the sun, struggling for its green scent, I want to strike a blow to each hand carrying a torch that lights a village somewhere. I want anger because I want what I've been warned to avoid. I want to do evil to evil. The scent of rosemary still on my fingers. I roll the needles through my palms. The more I need it, I feel the more that it will grow. And this one was my mom passed away a couple of years ago, and she at the age of 103, but she had hoped to see the first woman president elected and was quite disappointed. Um, and this is for her, a member of the poor. In the small house in Queens where I grew up, daylight flutters behind broken blinds, and proofs of memory scatter across the dining table in post-it notes in neon colors, on which my mother writes the name of a woman who calls her now and then to prove her fingers can still bend around a pencil. Milly, in a cursive learned in school 90 years ago. My mother's pennies are disappearing into her care. The strength of another woman who guides her to the bathroom, wipes her, places the mashed food before her, of which she always says now, ugh, what is this? She eats to clear the plate. The economy of care slithers down her body, while fat men in the center of things have learned to keep their pennies near, grossing under the pornographic growth beneath their hips, a world of poor in a country vat of aging bodies unaccounted for. A care box arrives to my mother's house from City Meals, canned cut vegetables in packages of albacore and salmon and powdered milk in a small jug, as though she might be a survivalist saving up. But this is a pleasant house with wall-to-wall carpeting and running water, and daughters calling oilmen, plumbers, boys from down the block to shovel and to fix. A system of care confuses the otherwise thinning bank account we stare at as the checks are written to hold her body upright, to keep her body safe. Nightly, she watches CNN, she and her caregiver nearly spitting at the scene where the yellow man, as her caregiver calls him, without mercy, visits again his beloved sea lake, which is neither sea nor lake. A man who confesses he does not sleep, and so it's clear he does not dream. He is new here in the country of broken bank accounts and aging women who have saved for their lifetime what he will spend today. Um, and this this poem I wrote maybe to remind my fellow Italian Americans who sometimes forget, or some of them forget, that they were once immigrants. And it's a little history lesson, a brief history. We were little and we were dark, and there were so many of us speaking our guttural dialects and unable to speak to each other. We descended like goblins, eyes tearing from the smoke and the smells of the ships that brought us here. We were greeted by spit and swift tongues, and in them we were wop and guinea and greaseball. We were given a lynching, and then we were given a holiday. We were given a key to a Renaissance Italy. So we were music, we were makers, we were lovers, we were famous. We were Giovanna to Jenny, Pietro to Pete, Francesco to Frankie. We were Philomena to Phil, Julio to Jules. We were quiet when the man with the ships became a story in a history book. He had rhymes, we had parades, we had a holiday from the grime and the news stories of we the radicals, we the troublemakers. We were little and we were dark. So just a reminder that many of us, right, have been there, and it's a lot of choice to forget. I'm going to read some poems that I've been working on since the book. And this one was a special request from my sister, so I'll see if I can read it without getting teary. It's called The Coyotes. I live in Medford in Massachusetts, and we had quite a few coyote sightings a few years ago. I don't know if people are still seeing them. The coyotes. The coyote ambles down the middle of Chester Street, and I mistake it for its domestic cousins. But it's stouter, a strange gray-white, directionless, undecided. My dog may know it's not a dog because he stares blankly back at it without his temperamental bark and growl. In fact, my dog is silent. I am walking us backward without realizing, and then we turn and run. I feel stupid 3 blocks down and swear I'll never walk down that street again. But that was spring, and I've walked that way early and late with Vinny nearly every day since, and no coyotes. They're in winter mode somewhere, and I find I'm missing the thrill of seeing one so out of place. At certain corners, Vinny comes to a dead stop and stares, a very slight whimper in his breath, or he moves past the corner and stands imperiously midway through the block to cross the street. Because he is dying, I let him lead the way. We cross the street and he stops again at the base of the stoop of Mary's house, the woman who lives alone now, whose brother calls her from the VA hospital each day. In spring, if she's still on this earth, she'll sit outside, call Vinny to her, good boy, and of her brother, she'll tell me how often he calls and what he's eating. He's living the life of Riley over there, adding her sweet cackle. Fearing the wild as I do, I marvel at them both, Mary and Vinny, in their simple union, the way it's carved a space inside my dog's tight memory. Oh. This one I wanted to read too, another new-ish poem. I think a lot of my poems lately have been sort of about transformations. Um, and this is one, and why people find transformations in the public so threatening and frightening, I do not know. So this is dedicated to one of my old students. It's called A New Book, and it has an epigraph, which is from my horoscope from March 6, 2023, which is remain suspicious of a fixed identity. He walks in the door of the Willa Cather room of the Jefferson Market Library, brand new to me. I embrace him, my former student, my former female student, who I have not seen in 8 long years, who I gave an extension to on a long essay for our junior seminar, and when it arrived finally in my inbox was just a sketch of what might have been brilliant. How could I not give an A? And now the same smile, a wider jaw now, strong shoulders as we slow hug. He's chosen a seat in the back, and I watch him from the podium, glad to have him here. I read a poem about teaching and dedicate it to him. He smiles, waits after the reading to talk, to be near, to say, you still know me, and I do. His long neck, his sure walk, and his smile, his slightly new voice, something between who he was and who he is becoming. I don't have any metaphors or similes or lyric tricks. He is tentative and seemingly both lost and found. He seems not to want to go home or seems to want to bask in the literary event of literary types. We are old people of all of the writers and our friends, and he is the new young man, newly made, explaining Instagram messaging to me as we walk along 6th Avenue to the restaurant. And this is, it's hard to read newer work, but I'm going to try one. Waiting for a diagnosis. My house is on fire, a slow burning. Every book, every sheet of paper, every synthetic rug is a kindling. I have woken from 3 dreams now featuring my dead parents as alive as ever, and I can hardly name my fears. A pulsing in my chest, my hands and feet in the kitchen making, and my heart a thrumming pressed to my rib cage. My love is waiting for the doctor to call. The doctor has called, a slow burning. We stand at the threshold. Do you smell the burning leaves? He asks. Yes, my darling. We are standing inside them. It's so hard on Zoom. I never know when to take a break, but I'm just reading through it. um, this is these are a couple of shorter poems, just trying to be to be with things, I guess. Lemon, If you have a good one, it's luminous when dry, but when you press the fruit against the zester, odd effects emerge. Its oily perfume sprays the air, and as the bright yellow bits collect upon the sturdy little plate, the mist of the peel glazes a dry film across your fingertips that's hard to wash away, though you want to, and though you don't want to, as though the peel itself understood how to portion out its joy. And that I read an article about how they're thinking about raking the deepest part of the sea for for energy, etc. Um, and um, and the poem actually started as an ekphrastic poem based on a painting from 1931 by Agnes Pelton called Sea Change. But it morphed into thinking about this project to find new places to find energy. Sea Change. Deep in the Clarion Clipperton zone, they say they will mine anything, polymetallic nodules, and with them, everything. Everything. Look at the starfish in a field of manganese resting on the sea's floor. Consider the floor bed alive, its scarlet and aubergine, onyx and rust, and nested here and here and here, a species, a civilization, quiet and thriving beneath those mechanical rakes. And then I tried this experiment. So I have just a couple more poems. This one is an experiment that Diane Seuss was posting these poetry prompts, I think, for the Academy. I see Madeline. Yeah, remember those? They were great, wonderful prompts. So this prompt was her write a 14-line poem with end stops and word repeated. But I had so much fun, it went a little bit over 14 lines. Bitter. Near the pit of the sweet ripe peach, a bitter taste emerges. Bitter is not the only way the oceans fill this earth. The bolted lettuce releases its bitter essence despite its milky center. What has made me feel bitter, my turn toward knowing, must meet with love now. I do not know the way on this road, bittered by war and rain. Why does regret taste so bitter on the tongue? The brain fills up with the dryness of this bitter fusion of love and hate. The opposite of bitter is joy. My mother's laughter, always tinged with bitter, was also always the opposite of bitter. To be without it, you must know the bitter to be something other than sour or fermented. Bitter trails off, just seems to walk away, be absent, but leaves its image on the tongue. Bitter wants to be a recluse, but keeps bumping into folks it knows. Bitter has never met a dog. They say that the more bitter the green, the better it is for you. We wrap our bitter green in oil and salt, but chew at its center to acknowledge its goodness. Even the sweetness of a pear can turn bitter if kept in the mouth too long, the skin insinuating itself. I am running in a field, bitter greens brushing my ankles, but I do not taste them. And I'm just going to go back to the book and end with a poem from here. And it's just a little homage since I'm heading back for a visit to New York, and I'm a Queens girl, so this is called To New York. How a city can give you up, give you away, how you could once own a city, how you fear it, can't feel it inside you anymore. The streets are strange as though they're concrete you once bounced your soles on, block after geometrical block, now are empty halls that echo with your stranger's gait. In any season, in this season of heat, the air is thicker than you remember. The skyline jags with new shapes. It was never kind. It was never mine. All the museums seem larger, seem to frame what's outside. I can only remember inside. The slap of the East River is manicured piers, one fancy hat on top of another. The exposed brick dimly lit, $40 an entree boutique restaurants shredding their light into a street once dark and empty below the Bowery. City Core's facade at twilight, a gray-green spider of light, right before we'd meet for drinks in the funny mall space we'd never seen in a city. The heavy roar of the E train that appeared without a schedule, and the F train's glowy orange seats, and 14th Street's dollar stores, and the grimness of Union Square Park you would not walk through but around. New York. I got lost on my way to the Strand last winter. I was not wearing black. I was not guided by anything. I know. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. That was wonderful. Next reader is Steven Ratiner. He's a poet, essayist, editor, and educator. He is the Poet Laureate Emeritus for Arlington and was recently elected as president of the New England Poetry Club, one of the oldest literary associations in America. His new poetry collection, Grief's Apostrophe, has just been issued by Beltway Editions. His laureate project, the weekly Red Letter Poems, is about to begin its sixth year and presents a diverse range of poets from up-and-coming talents to some of the most important voices from America and abroad. And you can find more information about him at steven.arlingtonlaureate@gmail.com. And I give you Steven.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being able to read with Julia. Julia and I read together. How many years ago, Julia? 20, 30, more? We must have been children then, right?
We were very young.
Very young. It's a treat to be able to read with you again now. So I think I'm going to read, I had some new poems, but I think I'm going to read exclusively from Grief's Apostrophe. I just want to say a few words about it to give you a sense of the arc of the book. It's in three sections. The first section deals largely with personal grief. The second broadens out to societal grief and communal experiences. But the third moves towards not quite healing, I guess, because we never really heal from grief. It moves towards some sort of moving beyond, taking what's happened to us and building from it. What I like to say is that I think these are the most defining aspects of being a human being, that we know these three things. We know what we love, we know we will lose, and that we know we can do something with that experience. We can build something with that experience. And I'll say something about the title. Grief's Apostrophe has a load of interesting meanings packed in. And there's threads all through the book, one of which is about making. And how we use languages to make things, not just the written and spoken language, but the language of art and music as well. And a lot that's about typography and language itself. So if you think about the Grief's apostrophe, the apostrophe is such a simple little unassuming punctuation mark, and yet so much hangs by it. The way that we are possessed or hope to possess something else. It's also that place marker for when, letters are missing in a word. So it's a sign about absence. And then it typographically looks like a thorn or a tear or maybe a snowflake. So we have a very complicated relationship to it. So I'm going to start and read the first poem that's in the book. It's a proem before those three sections, but it touches on this idea of making and how language is the sea that our minds are all swimming inside. And it's called Typos. Word instead of wood, but sodden it smoked when it burned. I wrote God for good, who was once, in my childhood years, crowned with the nimbus of that capital G. but now tends to be a placeholder for nightmare, tears. Seeking solace in the pastoral, but grove came at his grave, and the lymph nodes, irradiated, naked as nymphs, danced in a circle, brandishing shovels, while nightjars in down pine chanted Yiskadal for Yiskadash Shemay Rabor, that dreadful trill. And all I could do was stand there, heart stung, composing sorrow inside my head. Glossolalia of the keyboard. My fingers say what I cannot, never meant to. I'm marred by, married to this compulsive language and cannot shut it, shout it out, even in this house of silence. Live instead of love. Because that's what's left for me without your yes, or did I mean eyes, to bless my brokenness. Hello, hell. These inked lines sinking into white cotton bond, indelible. When I first read from this book, I would read in chronological order, and then my wife pointed out it's too many sad poems to start. So now I decided what I would do is give you a couple of little threads. So a lot of what's in this book is about my mother and father, the loss of them. As you all know, if you're my age or beyond, and maybe some of you are lucky enough to have your parents still with you, but if you've lost your folks, it's the largest universal change. The world does not have the same order without your mother and father there. Because, when we were kids, they were godlike presences that held the universe in place. And now suddenly we have to hold the universe in place. So I'm going to read you three from my mother and three from my father. The first one is a memory of my mother's very last time visiting me in my house here in Arlington. It has a few words that some you'll know, but some maybe will be unfamiliar. One is yarmulkes, it's the Jewish prayer cap. One is Eloheinu, one of the many euphemisms for God. Shofar is the ram's horn used at Passover to call the faithful to temple. But the one that's less known is a yad. If you've been in a Jewish temple and if you're reading from the Holy Scriptures, you can't touch the Torah. So you have a yad, a pointer with it's got a little finger on the end. So it's the artificial finger that's touching the scripture as you begin to read. So here's a poem called Jews. Jews, says my mother, out of nowhere at the kitchen table, staring off at what? The next door neighbors? The garden feeder? Our own reflections? Agreeing, I tell her the chickadees wear black yarmulkes. And the wax wings, her sly smile, wrap their prayer shawls smooth across narrow shoulders. What to say then concerning the sparrows scattering millet, and the mourning doves chanting Eloheinu, gleaning in the bleached grass? Is sunshine and abundant seed perhaps a vision of the promised land? And the blue jay's shofar, the call to prayer for a feathered diaspora? Now my mother gazes upward through the dogwood canopy, where a jetliner's bright silver points like a yad to the blue scripture unscrolling across the September morning. Though I don't know it then, this is the last time my mother will ever visit my home. I put up a second pot of coffee, toast the corn muffins, light cream, her packets of Splenda, the quiet between us. I lay my palm across the cobbled streets of old Jerusalem, my mother's arthritic hand. Amen, she murmurs, as if no one was listening. And then much further along, I'm visiting her down in Florida, and she became non-responsive because of all the drugs they were giving her. And then when she would be awake, she wouldn't eat. And the nurse thought I had some sway and tried to get me to convince her to eat. And this poem is part of that attempt. It's called For Now. Near the end, she stopped eating altogether. One evening, when I brought chicken soup shoaled with wild rice, a quick shake of her head, whispering, "What for?" And yet, in sleep, her mouth moved constantly, making a meal of departure. Watching her, I wondered, was the opposite of hunger grief, grace, love, or need? What feeds on our silence? Not that it would have made a difference, but I wish I'd proposed we take turns with the spoon. A mouthful, a mouthful, countering what for with for now. And then near the end of the book, all the ways that our parents return to us, haunt us, invest themselves in the things of our life. So here's a poem titled Anne, which was my mother's name. Anne. My mother took their names. It's what a woman did then. The bonds of marriage, more honor than ownership. Ratiner, Silverstone, rich. 3 beloveds, and after time, her steadfast hands helped nurse each into darkness. What a woman did. Until, alone again, it came her turn to wed oblivion. The dowry of molecules, the infinitesimal bursts of energy, bonds breaking, joining again, the earth's bacterial vow, I do, I do. 100 years since your birth, mother, and this rain-tilled April morning, I woke up wondering what I should call you now. Anne Carbon? Anne Nitrogen? Mrs. Silence. I'll read a little set for my father, but I should say this now that many of the poems, most of the poems perhaps in the book come from, my experiences in family history, but not all. And yet I tried to filter them all through one universal eye. I think I was, very much influenced by Whitman, thinking that one large eye could become eventually in our minds an example of a we. So some of them have direct experience from my own family, and some are borrowed from my wife's family or my friends. This one, though, is a direct memory. I can still remember this day. My father's father owned a dry cleaning plant in New York City. I'm also a Queens kid. And because my father was the oldest, he was taken in to have to run things, whereas his 2 younger brothers were allowed to go to college and get degrees, and both became lawyers. My father, I think, probably should have been an artist. He was a photographer, a sound recorder, and he did instead what was required of him. And maybe in some odd way, I'm living out part of what would have been his dream. So this is called learning the business. Come Saturday, when the steel vats backed up, you were the one, Daddy, who answered the call, drove down Jamaica Ave, stripped to the waist, and fished 200 pounds of dry cleaning from the murky slosh. Gabardine dresses and suit coats laid out across the workbench like the bodies of the drowned. Find the clog, flush the line, rescue the day, get the crew back to work. While somewhere your father sat chanting in temple, your brothers boisterous at Sardi's or the track. I remember you bought me an ice cream, and I perched on a high stool and watched as you half disappeared into the benzene tank, licking my vanilla swirl, giddy with the fumes. Driving home, you told me when I was older, you'd teach me the business, how to keep the books, so I'd have nothing to do with the scald of 6-foot presses and the chemical brew. 60 years later, and this is my accounting, Daddy. your left hand knuckled on the steering wheel, your right idly strumming the chords of my neck, and me wedged beside you, mouth slack with sugared milk. Even today, I can't read a ledger or a prayer book. And this, you were 200 pounds that Saturday morning, a little more than half that when, come January, the orderlies wheeled you back from radiation on the steel gurney, laid you in your hospital bed, limp as laundry. This is the wonderful thing that we get to do with poems that you don't get to do with real life. We can reformulate narratives. We can make something happen that should have happened in the world but did not. So this is a poem called Clockwork, and it's kind of like me rushing back to be with my dad, who was in a hospital bed in our living room dying. Now, in reality, I was 8.5, playing outside and oblivious. But in this poem, I get to be an adult and try to come back to see him. So it's stanzas with longer spaces between them. I'll give you a little bit more silence between them. And it's an interspersing of experiences. And it's called Clockwork. The dahlias are early this year. A matter of days, they said. The Perseid, stone swarm, fist-sized nickel iron and silicate, that comet's tail we pass through, regular as clockwork. The hospice nurse arrives at noon. Today, she's brought him a hot pastrami on seeded rye. Not to eat, she explains. Eating's out of the question. Just smell, just chew, then spit it into my hand. One per minute, sometimes more. Each bright arc. In the eyes, in the ears, in the tongue's lavish spill, this living, and the pleasure I derived to recognize even now his boyish smile. This section's mostly in italics. It's my father speaking. At 4 a.m., he explains, before the skies begun to lighten, robins and blackbirds, then mockingbirds, mourning doves, warblers, chickadees, a lull sometimes, but then the cardinal's brazen aria. Cacophony, I ask him, shifting uneasily in the bed, pain creasing his brow. Ecstasy. The aching, the waiting. A matter of hours. Windows streaked with pollen, sun making his rounds. The E train to Jamaica, transferring to the Q5 bus, and then the slow crawl along Merrick, then a 3-block walk up Francis Lewis. In my chest, opening like a dahlia, this nova of white petals, edged with violet and gold. Like clockwork, like fate. A matter of minutes. Late. I'll jump up ahead and read a poem that again is pure wish fulfillment. It's called Starbucks. I'm meeting my father here. He died nearly 30 years before a place like this ever existed. For 15 cents, he could enjoy a mug of Joe at the Busy Bee, Burton Dave's, the Parkway Diner. But no, more likely I'd find him dream-worn at his own kitchen table, blue flannel robe, aura of forsythia, pouring a fresh cup, cream, 2 sugars. To an 8-year-old, the coffee smell on his breath seemed intoxicating, alluvial, a bitter intimacy. Now I find a seat beside the window, buy each of us a tall latte, and sit patiently, watching the corona of our milky foam, sipped by time, retreating. I wanted to do two more that are about the idea of making. And very often these poems refer to artworks and other poems and plays. And this one begins with an epigraph from King Lear, and it's called The Singer. The epigraph is, though the rain it raineth every day, and the sun it sunneth on good days and bad, while the pain it paineth the deserving and the joy too it joys, but fickle and rare, while death is sheer diligence at palace and byre. When dreams are furrowed so deep in the earth, who knows what seed continues its growth? So I dip my pen into every knowing well, with the hey ho, the wind and the rain. Though the troubled ink bleeds through page after page, and only death is indelible. So what good my song if there's no heart to sing it and no ear to carry it back into sunlight? Yet the rain, it cometh a poor poet's pain, and the song sings still within the strumming rain. I'm going to read this poem called Gold Boat. And it's an image that if you visited Ireland, especially the National Museum, you've seen. But if you haven't, you might remember the cover of Seamus Heaney's great book called Seeing Things. And if not, I'll give you an example of it here. Let's see if I can hold it up properly. Remember seeing this? It's a little tiny, about this big boat made out of hammered gold. It was part of what was called the Broider Hoard from County Derry. It's several thousand years old. They were being invaded. They took their precious gold items, bracelets, brooches, wrapped them in oilcloth and buried them, hopefully to survive the invader. They did not survive, but buried for centuries and centuries, the gold lasted until a farmer dug it up by mistake, half destroyed it with his plow blade, but the anthropologist restored it, and it's some of Ireland's greatest treasures. So this poem is called Gold Boat, the Broider Hoard, County Derry. Hull, a hand's length of beaten gold. Gold straw for mast and spar, and both port and starboard 9 bright twigs for oars. The artist's burnished craft, unearthed by a plow blade near Limavady, after 21 centuries becalmed. Time might easily have crushed it for good, and yet tonight the moon's a curch, cupped like my father's palm. Memory in its hold, a word hoard amassed like stars. Our vessel, large enough to carry a single warm breath across the tideless dark, yet small enough to ferry all the names of the dead from the providence of our saying to the perdition of the said. I want to read a poem for a friend who's here named Gene. Gene was a maker all his life, and illness now has stopped him from doing things that he loved, painting and photography. But when I talk to Gene, I always tell him that, this is what we do, we makers. We make things as long as we can, and then we think back on them. So this is the making of a very fragile thing. You'll see what happens inside the poem. The title runs right into the poem. It's called Fold This Poem in Half Lengthwise, then bring the corners to meet the center line. Crease sharply, and again, bowing inward from the margins to form the swept back wings that conjure lift, loft, a reprieve from gravity. Know, please, how much cargo I've secured within this paper's hold. And yet how very nearly weightless it is, my joy, my grief. Assuming you've read the poem once, twice, whatever scrutiny paper wings will bear, then wait, please, no longer. Grasp this contrivance in a raised hand. Draw back and hurl it like a spear. Watch it swoop and veer, negotiating space, the glide, the grace, and eventual fall. Notice too, if you will, the feel of your open hand, the now emptied air, and your own unpleaded longing. As the book winds down to a close, I'll read you a few poems that will hopefully end us on a brighter note. Here's a poem called Escapement. Escapement, I used to read this poem to even young students in school, and I'd ask them if they knew the word, and they didn't, but they would conjure up all sorts of images about escaping and what you would be fleeing from. But hopefully you know. Escapement is a little mechanical device. It's what's in old-fashioned watches. It's that little rocker arm that goes up and down, that allows the gears to turn only one speck at a time, one notch at a time. Without the escapement, everything would be racing out of control. Escapement. Barefoot at the screen door, I watched my wife, my son, the blue car driving off, his arm thrust through the far window, a single wing beating, and then my own small tick-tock of a wave in response, bye-bye. And suddenly, it was clear. This is my life. The maple green scumble through wire mesh, the June sky stirring, the sound of car wheels hard on a corner, a horn, and then no sound at all. My life. A quiet jubilance. Even in its retreat, I could not keep my eyes from it. And somewhere, steel teeth on the escapement. A notch and no more. Another incremental breath and no less. And I'll finish with this poem. I have to show you this first, one more show and tell. So this is the cover of the book. When my wife and I were on vacation, we were in the Borghese in Rome, and we were there to see the beautiful Bernini sculptures. And I came across this one, which was Daphne and Apollo and Daphne. The god's name came first. Apollo and Daphne, and if you remember your Greek myth, it's when Daphne is a wood nymph, is being pursued by the gods. The gods are always tampering with us mortals, and very often for sexual purposes. This god is chasing Daphne. He wants to have his way with her, and she screams out to her father, who is a river god, and she prays for deliverance. And he does the one thing he can do, he casts a spell. And it's the spell that turns her into a laurel tree. And in the Bernini sculpture, you can see her hair is already leafing out. Her breasts are beginning to bark over. She's becoming something else. And when I saw this, I knew I wanted that to be the cover image for the book, because I thought to myself, this is very much what grief does in our lives. In this one instant, everything that we were before changes, or perhaps is taken from us. But something new begins at the very same time. And very often we have no way of knowing what this newness is about. In this one moment, Daphne's screaming out, calling her father's name. Her whole old world is disappearing, and a whole new world is beginning. What we have to do, I think, is take what we have then and make the best of it. So I like to end with a poem, which is one of the closing poems in the book. It's called Sláinte. It's the Irish greeting it's like a toast. It means to your health. Very often you'll hear that in an Irish pub. If you've been there, you've heard it before. It's dedicated to Seamus Heaney, who was one of the poets I very much adored. We became friends when I did a book of interviews, and he was one of my subjects, and we stayed corresponding friends after that. And when I was here in this very room, hearing the radio, and I missed the beginning of the news report, and clearly they were talking about someone who died, and then it became clear it was a poet. And I'm thinking of who were the oldest poets I knew they might be speaking about, and I never expected Seamus because he was not that old. and suddenly they said his name. Later that day, I wrote this poem, but unfortunately, I couldn't get a satisfactory ending to the poem. It took many years, and then the poem became renewed again, and I found a place for it to end. So it's a poem for Seamus, but really it's a poem for all of us. Let me thank you all for listening attentively. I love the in-person readings when I can actually feel if the poems are striking home or not. It's hard to do in the little squares here, but I hope at least some of these gave you material to explore in your own mind. So Sláinte for Seamus Haney. 3 months dead, and your poem appears in the glossy mag. Below the byline, your years pried apart with a paltry black hyphen. In your honor, I crack a cold one. Ragged moonlit clouds frothing atop a pint of midnight. And toast to all our fermented spirits, lush on the summer tongue. Our sullen eloquence, the cold glass weeping inside the palm. Because, and you'd be the first to tell me, you can no longer see, sip, taste, savor, nor honor with song this starless June diminuendo. I can and do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. What a incredible night of poetry.